Hello, Ammar. How are you?
I am back. I'm back, Shez. I know you've been having fun without me, but I'm back. How dare you have a Ferrari discussion without me, man?
It
I
was
am
it,
upset.
it was really difficult. It was like chatting to the wall.
And how did that feel? You had better in. Some would argue you had better insights coming from the wall than from me.
It was pretty similar. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh God. Okay. Wow. It would have been better just saying, "Hey, though the wall was better." But yeah, I mean, talk to my hand has a different meaning altogether now. Talk to my wall.
Yeah, that's right. So Ammar, it's good to see you. It's good to be
Mm.
talking to a real human being across the world on a Zoom style platform. But it's been a slightly slow news week. I felt. What do you think?
It has been a slow news week. The reason for this, I blame Max for all of
So it was
these things
Max's fault.
because, yeah, well, I mean, had he opted out, and I know he couldn't have opted out of his clause, but those contracts are all, if Max wants to go, he can go, right? Had he done that, we would be on every single day, maybe twice a single day, every single day, and just been chatting
We're
about
just we're
all the
just making up
permutations.
new grammar here too. Like
That said, though,
twice a single day.
twice a single day. Uh, because that's how it would be. It would be pandemonium. It would be mayhem. Like it'd be all of that. That said, George Russell hasn't signed a contract yet. I'm gonna guess now that George is playing hard to get to, as he should. By the way, he should really be offended by everything. Be like, no, bleep you. I want 5 years or forget it. Whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure he really wants 5 years. Who knows what's going to happen in 5 years' time? Do you want to be locked
It's
in
true.
to a contract? Look at what's happened to Max,
Money,
locked
the
into a
money.
long-term contract. Look at what's happened to Charles, locked into a long-term contract, which
Oh,
started off as a rubbish contract in the first place. Ooh, did I just say that?
oh my goodness! You said the R word in there. Goodness. Gee.
We have different definitions of what the R word is, Amar.
We're bored, man. It's summer. Nothing's happening. What do you
Well,
expect?
I'm
Well, actually,
not.
there's something happening. No,
What?
nothing.
Right.
Nothing's happening.
So listen, I'm not bored because as usual, whenever there's a break in the news cycle, it gives me an excuse to talk about all things F1 2026 and onwards,
Mm.
and how I see the face of Formula One changing. And you know, it's refreshing every now and again for us to move outside our and your dear viewer your zone of comfort, which is Max, Lewis, Charles, George, Ferrari,
Ah.
Mercedes, McLaren. Well, actually, McLaren's never really that much of a safe zone. No one seems to want to watch those videos
No one
anyway.
cares. We have two contenders that are tied by what not tied. They're virtually tied, right? I mean, it's 7, 8 points, whatever it is, right? It's no one cares. Just no one cares. I mean, we have to. I don't know. It's not a topic for today, Shez, but why? Why does no one care? I mean, 2021 was kind of like this, no? Right? I mean, I think the
Maybe,
gaps were a
maybe,
little bit
maybe,
bigger.
maybe that's what we'll do. Maybe the next video that we do, maybe the next but
Why?
one,
No one's gonna watch it.
we'll try and dissect why Oscar and Lando having a championship battle fought out between themselves is not interesting. But right now, I want to try and bring everyone along on a little journey, maybe of some optimism, maybe not of some optimism, because I want to get your views on mine. I want to know what you think about this brave new world that is F1 2026. So I'm just going to start with an open question. Look, F1 is currently experiencing a boom, an absolute explosion of popularity. You cannot get a race ticket for less than £1,500
Oof.
in the old Majesty's money, where it used to be like 200 or 300 quid because everyone wants to go to a race, and there's record numbers of online TV viewers. Our channel is doing great guns too, just talking about Formula One. Huge popularity. So why are we changing the rules? Like, what's the point? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Well, what is the age-old analysis that comes out of team principles? I remember Fred Vasseur saying this, a little while ago, but it probably is said in many different ways by others. Is if you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. No, so that's the idea. And we're going to talk about 2026, but keep in mind how you got here today. It has a lot to do with what we would have been talking about in was it 2019, 18-ish? And I know the 2021 regs should have gone into play in 2020, right? So yeah, I'm gonna guess 18, 19 is probably when we would be talking about these things. So yeah, I mean, F1 is about as popular as it can be. Shez, I'll just add to what you said in that it looks like there's going to be heavy bidding, at least in the United States, on trying to get F1 rights away from ESPN and perhaps Apple, perhaps Netflix. I don't know, who knows? Amazon might get in there. That's huge business. Typically, if the American market is booming, it generally means more dollars, even if it doesn't really mean popularity in terms of numbers. And I think at the end of the day, I think every stakeholder is looking at the bottom line. So I think it's a great time to have a rule set
But
change as well.
why is it? I don't understand that. I don't understand that.
Well,
Like, but if
because
there are already viewers there, why is it
I
suddenly a
mean,
great idea to change the regs?
isn't
I mean,
it
I can
isn't
think
it
of a
all?
number of reasons, but if
Well,
there
what
are,
is the reason not to change it?
because you're already drawing in huge numbers of
It's
viewers,
never enough,
fans.
Shez.
But are you
You're telling me
saying?
rich people
But are
don't want
you?
to get richer? Is that what you're saying?
But are you saying that changing the rules is going to increase viewers, or is it going to upset the apple cart and suddenly people are going to switch off because what the heck is this?
Yeah, but you're looking at the outcome. You're looking at the outcome. The whole idea is if you're stagnant, then you are going to become stale after a while. And we live in a day and an age when everyone's attention spans are about wee bit, right? So you got to keep trying new things. And I think some of the things that have been proposed are essentially ways to get us more entertained, not just on Sundays, not just on part of Saturdays, but also on Fridays and maybe even on a Wednesday. And who knows what that would look like. So
Okay,
that's it's more.
I see where you're going with that. I would say somewhat cynically that the main reason, the major driver towards changing the regulations for 2026 is to get the VW group in, and as a byproduct, Honda
Okay,
back.
that's fair
I
enough.
would argue that that is the main reason
I
for
can't
changing the
disagree.
rules. Um, but does
Also
that
related to money, though, ultimately, no. But yes,
yeah,
I agree.
sure, it is, but it's not about getting more viewers in, and it's certainly not about that. The primary aim of this is not necessarily to make the sport more entertaining. Although, hopefully, I'd argue that one of the byproducts of this is that the sport might become more entertaining if we can allay some of the fears that I think a lot of fans have got. I would say some of those fears have been stoked by the teams and drivers. Um, so let's have a little chat about some of those things. Um, so some of the problems have been that a lot of the drivers have been sat in their sims in in Middle England, which is where everyone lives, because Formula One has a massive British bias, and uh,
I can't even respond to any of these things. Like, I can't. By the time you're going to give me the question, I'm going to have 15 things to select from. I can't even get there.
oh, I love it. Um,
Middle England.
they've all been sat there complaining. They said, "Oh, I've got too much to do. We're going to lose all the power down the straights. We're going to be changing down in the middle of a straight. What the hell is this? What is going on?" To that, you respond, "How, Ammar?"
To that, I respond, that's a perfectly natural response, right? And no one enjoys change of any kind, right? At any stage in their lives. I mean, when we're kids, we're screaming and kicking and crying about it. When we're adults, we're still doing much of the same, maybe in different ways. Some safe, some not so safe, some entertaining, some not so entertaining. And so, yes, naturally, you have the drivers kind of giving their feedback about what they think it'll be. The reality is that when you get back to the track and when they're fighting for or contending for a championship or something that's important, especially for the midfielders, I think a lot of that will just change by virtue of, just looking at what's ahead, the idea of being able to win a prize. And good God, if you're one of the contending teams, then it's all going to be fine. So yeah, I mean, I would expect the drivers to have some consternation, some skepticism, there I say some cynicism about it, but I think that's just par for the course, Shaz. I don't know how else you can have that. I mean, when has there ever been a reg set change and drivers have been like, yes, yes? I don't think so. I don't think the's ever been anything like
2017,
that.
2017. I think they all loved it because the
They
car.
all loved
Yeah,
it.
of course they did, because the cars got lower, they got wider, they had
Okay, that's
more
fair. But I
overbody
mean,
downforce. Yay, we could just keep our foot down
then they
all the
should be
time.
happy about some of this. The cars are going to get a little bit smaller. Like you can't get everything. Look, if there are complaints, that's with this particular rule set. I mean, the next one is can only serve to improve it a little bit more. And from where I can see it, yes, it's not going to be great. Well, I don't want to say that. Yes, it may not be a big leap forward in terms of where the drivers want it to be, but it's certainly a step forward, right? If that's what you want to
So
say.
you're all for it? Like, I mean,
Well, I
the
mean,
reason
there's no
I'm
choice.
asking that question is because because some of these fears are grounded in reality, right? We're already
Yeah.
hearing that F1 have had to change the way that they map the engines, because especially on a circuit like Monza, where you have long straights, not that many braking zones, how are you going to recover the energy? Number one. Second, the straights are so long that what's stopping you from running out of battery in the middle of a straight, and that's suddenly dropping your power? So they've had to mitigate for that by creating a drop-off formula, so you can't use all of your engine your battery power at the beginning of the straight. You have to gradually increase it, and then it gets to a point where you reach a certain speed and it stops. You cannot have any
Yeah.
more power. And they're talking about reducing the amount of recovery and the amount of battery power you can have at certain tracks, because they're worried that actually you're not going to be able to recover the amount that you need around a lap anyway. So all of this is a compromise, because the fundamental concept is based on something that isn't really achievable. This sort of 50% battery, 50% internal combustion engine. All of this, as I said, maybe cynically, but maybe realistically, based on a desire to get more engine manufacturers into the sport. What do you think
Yeah,
of that?
well, because I'm not sure I fully agree, I fully see the outcome of what you're saying. I think you're right. There might be some circuits where, as you said, Monza, Baku, etc., where that these sort of compositions of engine and battery power could be impacted. To me, in a 24 race calendar, that's a small adjustment. I mean, we're seeing Monaco being changed for, it's sort of similar reasons, not the same thing, but they're trying to tweak something that's inherently flawed. So I get where you're coming from. I'd have to imagine that there would be longer braking zones, right? Less downforce, smaller cars. So maybe some of the complaints that you have, and you're laughing at me, no one can see that probably. Maybe some of the complaints you have are sort of offset by that. Like, I don't know. Maybe that could be the thing. Look, the whenever you have change, right? The anticipation period is far more hectic, far more complaint filled than the actual one. So, is it going to be flawless as a concept? No, absolutely not. That was the case with even this one, right? How many technical directives did we have? Didn't we start this era of Formula One with porpoising, right? How many people remember that, right? So there's stuff that
All
happens.
of
There's
us.
stuff that needs to get changed. All of us remember.
Okay,
Yeah. So
okay.
it is what it is. So
Let me come back to my original question again, okay? Because the point of this rule set, the point of bringing in ground effect, was to reduce the amount of reliance these
dirty
Formula
air.
One cars have on overbody aero,
Sure.
therefore, exactly creating less, not less dirty air, but dirty air that is sent in a different direction.
Correct.
But
It's transferring it
what
to
the
a
Formula
different.
One teams did is that they took what they had learned in the previous rule set, which was that outwash creates faster cars, and they just applied that to these cars, and that sort of concept has propagated, so that outwash is now one of the biggest characteristics of these Formula One cars, and that is what creates a dirty air that has slashed the amount of downforce that a following car has. Now, what you could argue is, okay, great, we're going to go to a new rule set, and we're going to be able to change all that, and we're going to be able to change things and reduce the amount of dirty air being produced. But one argument you could make is that you could have made those changes in this rule set. Some of the changes that they are making are in direct response to the teams creating more outwash. But Nicolas Tombazis very clearly said, look, we are not making these technical directives. We are not changing the rules in this rule set because we know that 2026 is coming. So could they have just done that in the current
Yeah,
rule
they could.
set?
I mean, but yes, yes, they could have, but we know that these are all politically riddled, and there's a lot of sort of what makes obvious sense doesn't always happen, and the reason for that is there's a lot of jockeying behind the scenes. I mean, I go back to the porpoising thing again, right? There's a very famous Christian Horner quote that I cannot repeat here because we'd have to censor ourselves, right? But he's telling Toto Wolff to essentially change his car. I mean, these are the kind of things that I would anticipate happening. And so, yes, what seems fairly simple has it doesn't happen. And I get with you. I mean, look, there's always this balance. We've talked about this before, right? How much tinkering can you do to the point where you're just causing unintended consequence after unintended consequence to mitigate certain intended consequences, or and look, whatever you come up with, Ches, in a couple of years, the teams will find a way to kind of come around it. I mean, that's part of the reason why we have a reset, if you will. The formula is being changed, right? And so I don't know how these new regs will exactly play out. I don't think anyone does. I mean, we keep talking about Mercedes, for example, having the best engine. Okay, best power unit, I should say. We don't know how that exactly plays out in translating in terms of races actually. And I think as fans, if you get a field where the top five, let's say the top five, six contenders are closely matched, that's what we want. And to some extent,
But
we're not to
that's
say
not
we're
going to
not
happen.
getting that.
That's not necessarily going to happen
Maybe,
in the
yeah.
new
So we
rule
don't
set
know
either.
that. I mean, yeah.
In fact,
Yeah, that doesn't guarantee anything.
history tells us that when you have a new rule set, other than
Usually one or
2017, there's
two.
one or two teams, and normally just one team that absolutely blasts everybody else out of the water. So I don't think you're necessarily going to get that. But look, I am
Right
going to
away.
bring.
But the hope would be for year 2, year 3,
Yeah,
right? For that to
okay,
happen. Like
but again, a similar pattern happens, right? So we've now got to that point in this rule set where less than a second covered the top 5 drivers at the Hungarian Grand Prix, and yet these cars can't follow. So at the point in the rule set where all the teams converge, the teams have suddenly understood how to make their car more difficult to follow, because that makes the car faster, and therefore you have lots of really closely matched cars that can't overtake each other because they'd never create the delta required to be able to get past anyone.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
And we are jumping into this territory, right? I love the idea of active aero. Like, I don't understand why everyone is, I love the idea of that. Like, what is?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can have low downforce, high downforce. Like, you can change wing. That sounds kind of cool.
So let's
I can also see a wing flying out as someone's trying to.
Let's get into the chassis side of things, because I think actually there is a big reason to be optimistic about next season, right? So the first is that, like as you say, the active aero is going to be used in pretty much the same way by everybody, right? You're going to have a high downforce setting and a low downforce setting. You're going to use the low downforce setting to reduce drag down a straight. The only problem with that is that it reduces the slipstream effect, right? So you're not going to have cars being able to slipstream past cars in front of them quite as easily. Fine, you say there are engine management ways of getting past that, and instead of a DRS zone, we're not going to have DRS anymore. We're going to have specified.
What is it? What are they calling it now?
Oh my god, isn't it? Is it OM or something?
It called?
It's not MOM anymore. It's called OM. It's like It's an overboost function. It's like KERS. You press a button, you get an increase in power from the battery, from the motors.
Kind of like Formula E to a certain extent. Yeah.
Correct. So you get a push to pass button, and that will basically be instead of DRS. And if you want to know how effective that can be, there's a really cool shot of Nick Heidfeld at the 2009 Bahrain Grand Prix, when he hits the button against, I think it was a Force India that day. But it's brilliant. He hits the KERS button and suddenly he's like, he's gone. Right, it's like having an extra 160.
Video game, right? Yeah.
I mean, they only had 80 brake horsepower extra, I think, with KERS. They'll have another sort of 160 horsepower or something silly like that when they hit the the overboost function.
Well, I
But
mean,
so they'll have that, but the active aero in and of itself, I don't think is going to change the game too much. Other than it will mean that actually getting into a braking zone, cars should be able to follow a little
bit
bit
more closely,
better
yeah.
because the dirty air coming off the car in front of them shouldn't be quite as bad. And also, what I really like about this rule set in terms of the way the chassis has been configured is that just like with the 2022 rules, they've gone away and done a huge amount of research. So with no real precedent to fall back on. The ground effect hadn't been used for like 40 years up until that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they turn up in 2022 and they say that, look, if we start using ground effect, then this is how much the downforce will be cut. But they didn't figure that the cars to create that downforce, any kind of downforce, would need to be run really low and really stiff, and that would then induce porpoising, and it would create all kinds of compromises. To the point that we're still not at a place where that really functions. So pure ground effect, they have now learned and they are now implementing, isn't the answer to the dirty air problem. And what we've just talked about, this outwash thing, actually has been the killer for allowing cars to be able to follow effectively. So what they've done is that they have not got rid of ground effect completely. You still have a middle boat section, and then you have a flat area outside of that on the floor. You just don't have the skirts on the side or the intricate little seals to try and seal that air in. But you do have a differential in height. So there is a bit of a tunnel. There still will be some ground effect, but the diffuser will be shorter. So it's not going to create the same amount of downforce as what you get right now. But what has changed is that the barge board area is now designed explicitly to direct air inwards, so you don't get air being outwashed, and the rules have been set up expressly to do that, which should mean that the cars will be able to follow a bit better. And because there's less downforce, that's why you get the longer braking zones, because they don't have as much downforce to rely on, even in that high downforce setting. So you put those two things together, and actually, yeah, sure, the drivers will be doing a huge amount more in the car, but actually that's their problem. I don't care. If they're having to work harder, it's the same for all of them. And the drivers that are better at doing that will do better, but they will be able to follow better. And that should mean closer racing, regardless of where you are necessarily in the pecking order. And that should have an effect even when the field compresses towards the end of the rule set. So I'm really excited about that. I think actually it'll be great that they'll be able to follow better, and that actually hopefully we'll be able to get a bit more overtaking. But there is a way to really enhance that effect. And that is, Ammar, something that Stefano Domenicali mentioned in a cheeky chat he had with the race. Was it this week or last week? I can't remember. But
Last week.
But the race asked him a whole heap of questions from their race members club, and one of the things was about how F1 are going to develop how F1 are going to develop sprint weekends going forward. Now, Stefano Domenicali said, look, sprints are not going away. Basically because they bring in a huge number of fans, and actually even the teams are now behind them. But can we start to experiment with different formats? And reverse grids was one of those things.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so what do you... Okay, so just on the face of it, if I said to you, Ammar, we're having reverse grids, before I even start to explain how I think that would work in a race weekend or in a Grand Prix weekend, what's your initial reaction to reverse grids?
Yeah, so my initial reaction was I go back to 2019 Singapore, right? When you had the post-qualifying press conference, and I believe it was Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, and Sebastian Vettel on I guess at the dais or whatever, wherever they are, being asked about precisely this reverse grid. And I think someone, I mean, I don't know who asked the question. They asked, there's been a lot of talk about reverse grids. Like, what is your opinion about it? And they all kind of answered some form of this is complete BS. And whoever suggested that, does not know what they're doing. And my initial instinct reaction was just that, right? But I think the key lies in the details that you'll explain. So my short version answer, Shez, because you're going to explain the details, is I love it. I love it for a sprint weekend. I don't love it for an actual race, but oh, sorry, sprint weekend. I love it for a sprint race, but not the actual race. And I think it could be kind of fun. If and again, Shez, I just want to say why I think I like it. I'm not sure that the idea itself, the outcome of a reverse grid in a sprint race will be what Stefano hopes for it to be, other than perhaps be more entertaining. I suppose it could be entertaining. Depends on how much risk those, sort of front runners in the championships want to take, right? But they're also essentially competing against each other more than, I don't know, a Lance Stroll who qualifies first by virtue of reverse grid. Oops, see what I did there? And so I think regardless of the outcome, the idea behind tweaking this goes back to the entertainment aspect of it, which is to give us something more to think about and want to watch on Fridays and Saturdays more so than just Sundays. So I love it. I love experimenting, just a little bit, in at least in places where you can keep the sacred thing sacred, which is the WDC as well as the Constructors Championship. And I think that doing this on a sprint race, it's fine. And it's been proven to be pretty decent in F2 and F3, no?
So it seems you are at odds, though, with even the absolutely huge following that I have on Twitter. 21 people voted
wow.
on my poll. Yes, 21 of you out there in the void voted. Maybe I should have put it up on our YouTube channel. Maybe I will at some point. Maybe I will after this. Let me know what you guys think. But in that tiny little sample set, 20% said no, said yeah, let's go reverse grid. 20% said nah, what are you talking about? No, actually, no, they didn't. I've said this completely wrong, and it's live, so I can't even edit it out.
This is unbecoming of you to state data inaccurate.
I know, and I love stats. So 20% said no, hate it. No, they didn't. I said it wrong again. 20% said yes, we love it. 20% said we don't care. 60% said no chance, hate it. And I don't understand that. What is there not to like about a reverse grid? Look, before I tell you what I think the weekend format should be, because I do agree with you. I think in this day and age, a reverse grid is still a gimmick, and it shouldn't be part of the main points giving section of a Grand Prix weekend, right? I don't think that's what should be. You shouldn't get 25 points for a reverse grid win, and there's no way to make it competitive if you do it that way. So, but I do think there are advantages. The first is that, well, the main one really is that, aside from the fact that you will see faster cars starting at the back of the grid, driving forwards, right? Having to pass cars, that's the name of the game. It forces the engineers to change the way they're thinking about designing their cars, especially for those weekends, because it's no longer about creating a car that is just super fast over one lap that will then just ride off into the distance and create a 30-second gap to the next person. But if that doesn't happen and they get beaten off the line, then can't follow, because that's not what their car is designed to do. No, this forces the engineers to design a car that can follow, that can work well in dirty air, can preserve its tyres, especially its front tyres, and therefore have a better chance of overtaking. It's not just about driving off into the distance, and it's therefore baked into the rules. It's implicit in the rules that is what you are trying to do with your car, right? And there'll be a group of people that will turn around and say, well, it's not Grand Prix racing, right? And to that I would argue that fixing a grid in reverse, say, championship order, which is how I would do it, is just as artificial, no more, no less, than fixing the grid the starting grid based on who is fastest, but it does give you a better chance of having a more interesting race. Because if you really think about it, qualifying in the way that we have it right now, the onus is on you to drive, to make your car as fast as possible. That car will then qualify first, all things being equal. How can you then expect in the race that the fastest car is not then just going to drive off into the distance?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the recipe for an interesting race. But look, I'm not trying to completely change the game. That's too much. Okay, that's too much, too soon, and it would change the fundamentals of Grand Prix racing as we know it right now. But I do think it's worth an experiment. And the way that I would probably do it is keep Friday as it is for a normal Grand Prix weekend, FP1, FP2, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then have your sprint race on a Saturday morning, but do that in reverse championship order. So there isn't a qualifying for the sprint race on a Saturday morning. Yes, you lose one competitive session, but I think you gain a much more interesting competitive session than a standard sprint race, which is basically just the first stint of your normal race, and therefore there's you know that the fastest car will be at the back of the grid, and nobody's going to sandbag their way through the entire season just so that they have a better starting position in that reverse grid sprint, right? So reverse championship order, then you have normal qualifying on Saturday afternoon, and then you have the Grand Prix proper on Sunday. So the weekend still builds into this big denouement at the end on the Sunday where you have the Grand Prix, but you have a much more interesting sprint race. The only danger I can see of this is that the reverse championship grid sprint race might be the most interesting part of the weekend. Okay, there you go. That's what I think.
So what you're saying is we could be more interested in the reverse grid sprint race than we would in the actual Grand Prix. Hey, look, yeah, maybe. I mean, look, we've had Grand Prix where, as you said, the leader goes away like 20, 30 seconds in distance and so on and so forth. I would also, to add to your argument for this format, or at least for trying it, is that number one, let's just try it. Let's just try it on a couple of sprint races, right? And see how it works. The second thing, Shez, and my instinct here is, while we're all focused on the criticism because of what it means in the scope of the championship and the front runners, I think you're missing out on the potential of having an outstanding midfield battle, because those are the guys who will want to compete their hearts out, right? I could see a Lando Norris or an Oscar Piastri, if we're going to use today's sort of situation, saying, okay, even if I'm P19 and 20, I don't want to take too many risks, right? I'd rather just walk away with a point or maybe even no points than to just wreck my car and wreck my...
But if you make it worth their while, so if you say 10 points for a win, and then suddenly you've got Oscar and Lando, or George and Max and Lewis and Charles, all of those guys starting at the back of the grid, coming through together, so fighting each other, but also then having to fight this hotly contested midfield battle as well. Oh man, it would be gold.
But just think about it, right? The Nico Hulkenbergs of the world, the Carlos Sainzes and Alex Albons, they're competing for having a legitimate chance on being on a podium, which they wouldn't have otherwise. So yeah, I don't see why that wouldn't be fun. I mean, look, we often just concentrate our chat on everything that, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, etc. represent, but it would be nice to be able to just kind of give these guys some spotlight too, because we all know how hard they work to kind of make their way up the grid. And this would be amazing to see, Isaac Hadjar and I don't know, right now it's Liam Lawson, but who knows who will be next year. But, these guys fighting for a legitimate chance to be at the top of the podium on an F1 weekend. So I love the idea of that. We get a chance to...
Let's be honest though, in this year's championship, if that had happened, Fernando Alonso would be starting at the front in nearly every sprint race.
That's true. That is true. And Fernando's not letting anyone by. So
can you imagine? It's like playing a video game and like your final boss, when you've got through everybody else, is freaking Fernando Alonso. Like there's no way you're getting past him, but you're gonna die trying. It'll be freaking brilliant. I would definitely pay money to watch that. In fact, I pay money to not watch it. So why not pay some money to actually watch something like that? It would be great.
It would be fun. It's not true racing. I get it. Many people are just going to respond with, "Hey, this is not racing."
It's not.
I get it,
It's not my
but
F1.
sprints are wow. What was that? Who is that? Is that your character for the prototypical guy who does not? Wow. Okay, there we go. You stumped me there, Shez. I have no
Mate,
response to
you
that.
can't see it. I've got my slippers on. I've got my pipe in the back.
There you go.
It's not my
You're
F1.
you're the curmudgeony guy who sits in his boxers on Saturdays and like, "Oh, no, no. I mean, I don't look, guys.
Man, I like
Let's come
I want to
experiment.
deny it, but that's it's true. I'm wearing my boxes right now.
Uh, well, good to know. You know, sprint races have kind of become a little bit of fun, and they're not always fun. I mean, look, why they're not fun are not fundamentally connected to the format, as opposed to as we talk about with many other things like Monaco. It's the fundamental characteristics of the car. That does not allow for a lot of overtaking, and that's a different topic we've talked about already. But the idea of trying something new again, with the chance of giving some of these up and coming teams and guys in it, like an Ollie Behrman competing, right? I mean, that would be fun. There's six rookies on the grid, and most of them would be competing to be on a sprint podium. And I'd say give them a podium, and give them give the winner a pizza too. I mean, why not?
Why
I
pizza?
don't know.
Is that
I don't
because
know. Just
is that because you're a Ferrari fan and that's the only thing you can think of?
there you go.
That they
Yeah.
just eat pizza.
Yeah.
Wow.
You see me? Yeah. Well, right now
Wow.
I have
Just pigeonholing the entire Tifosi.
pigeonholing. Yeah, pizza. There you go. Yeah, yeah. Or do what is it like the Brickyard style? Get a bottle of milk
Bottle
or
of milk.
something. And one.
What if
Yeah, there
they're
you go.
lactose intolerant?
I don't know, man. There's something or the other there. I mean, I'm sure there's something there. They don't have to drink it really. They could just like throw it on themselves, right?
Exactly, and Lewis isn't going to have a bottle of milk, is he?
Oh
He's
yes.
going to want some
We cannot
oat
have
milk.
anything nice without like. I mean, everything has to be contested. I don't know. Give them some French fries. Come on, like that'd be fun.
Why do they have to be French?
I don't know. We call them freedom fries here in the U.S. nowadays.
They're still called that. Okay, final point of order. I promise this is the last thing. Um, uh, I also have a thought about how a change in regulations might change the way we think about some of the tracks that we go to. Not Monaco, but like Monaco is never going to change. It's always good. Like there's no point doing a reverse grid sprint in Monaco. It would just be completely pointless. The only way that would work is if the cars get a heap smaller and a heap lighter, and not by the sort of 30 kilos or so that we're getting in 2026. Which look, I'm not scoffing at. It's better to be going down by 30 kilos than it is to be going up by
Oh,
50
but
kilos. I'm definitely happy with that. But having smaller, lighter cars with less downforce, with longer braking zones, with active aero, being able to follow a bit better, does that change the dynamic of tracks like Spa? Because look, we know that one of our friends, Nasher, on Quickstop, had tweeted out and said in a video that actually look has Spa outgrown its usefulness as a Formula One track. And my argument to that was it's not Spa's fault. It's the car's fault. They have got bigger to a point that they probably don't need to. And yes, there's a whole heap of safety stuff and structures that add weight that have to be there. The Halo is a good example, but there are ways of making the cars lighter. Don't have such a massive battery pack. Go to a simpler, lighter engine with less hybridization. All of those things are possible. So are we seeing a potentially successful trend towards cars getting lighter and smaller, and therefore making tracks that are currently less relevant more relevant?
I don't know, Shez. We'd have to see what next year's. They're having Belgium next year, right? And then they're not having it the year after, right? So I think that'd be interesting. I think Belgium by itself is a unique example. And this year, Belgium got a lot of flack because of, how the race started and how it was delayed and all. And while I get all the criticism, at the end of the day, that Belgium's been a particularly cruel track in terms of driver safety. So I can see why, the entertainment was given up in favor of safety, perhaps a little too much. But that's about it. To your point,
Never too much, Amar. You could never have
ne-
too much safety.
never too much safety. Yeah, there you go. And so that's an outline. And again, I tell you this with again with the same logic applies. You cannot plan your way for all the exceptions that you're going to find in life in general. So you adjust where you need to, and those tracks will need to adjust. Now they're not going to be on the calendar every year either. But just don't take it from me as far as why I love Belgium. Like take it from the drivers. They love that. They wax lyrical about it. Like that. This is not me saying that. So I mean, clearly, if the drivers love a track, then I mean that's at least one area where I would imagine you would want to listen to the drivers. So that by itself makes sense. I think, look, as the cars get smaller, and I don't know how much smaller they get in the next rule set. The reality, Shez, is that as long as we're going to use battery, there is no other way to kind of get. And that's the big elephant, the heavy elephant in the room is the weight of those batteries. If you just go back to the V8s or the V10s and we have sustainable fuels,
Well,
I don't have to worry about
look,
it.
I don't think it's a complete. It completely solves everything, right? And the example I would give is Hungary. So Hungary, in the pre-turbo hybrid era, was boring as hell, man. Like every single time I watched a race there, it was just pure procession. The only interesting race they had was 1998, and in 1998, it was only interesting because Michael did a pit stop overtake and then put in like qualifying lap after qualifying lap. So unless you were following the race,
I
you
want
know,
that to happen in a race. Like I wonder,
sure,
can
but
you have like a magic
that's
safety car kind of
but
thing?
that's
Yeah.
once in a blue moon, right? And then suddenly the turbo hybrids turned up, and for some reason Hungary suddenly became very, very interesting. And I would argue that actually, some of the newer circuits, and then even the newer circuits that I'm talking about being new are like 20 years old. Bahrain, has been
Yeah,
around since
Bahrain's 20.
2005, man, like
Yeah, that's
2004
crazy.
even. It's
Crazy.
20 years old. And those tracks, this is what we were talking about before, is that often our perception of those tracks has been coloured by what drivers have said about them. So Bahrain was always typically drivers hate it, it's boring, and we don't like driving it. It was the
Produced some
same,
amazing races.
right? And it was the same. Same at Abu Dhabi as well. All of those tracks. We don't like them, but actually, now that we've been there for a while, they're purpose-built tracks. They're not street tracks. And suddenly, they're at a premium and they're much, much more interesting. And the races I think at Bahrain are great. I think Circuit of the Americas is awesome, and I think Spa has the potential to come back and be its old great self again. It's just we're in a period of Formula One right now at the end of a rule set where the cars have just got too big and too heavy and too reliant on being low and stiff. If you take that away, which will happen next season, then actually there's a potential that those tracks will become more relevant
Yeah.
again.
Well, but also Formula One is in this time of massive popularity where it wants to try and experiment not just with the racing product on track, but they're looking at off-track locations because their logic is we're like the roaming circus, right? That goes to as many different places in the world as they can. So there is a little bit of a demand in terms of being able to go to destinations all over the world because they serve as, a point of tourism as well. I mean, and you went to Hungary, right? I mean, you didn't have the gift of time, but many folks do stay and go and explore the city too. And so part of the idea behind bumping off tracks like Spa is to be able to go to other places like Madrid. And there's talk about going in South Africa, which absolutely 100% should happen. The fact that we don't have an African race is just shameful, downright. Kyle Lamy hopefully will make its way back. And so there's that. There's going to be a little bit of tinkering around locations as well. And then I would just argue we cannot manufacture our way into having an interesting race every single weekend. There is nothing we can do to avoid races being boring. It's just going to happen. There's going to be times where things happen and they don't. I mean, if you're going to blame it on anyone, really, I mean, think about this year. If you're going to blame races for being boring, that's not on McLaren, right? For example, that's on Red Bull and Max. That's on Ferrari and their two drivers. That's on them to make those cars competitive enough to. I get you can't follow, but there's a big gulf. There's a big delta between those cars being the McLarens being 20 seconds ahead, and then everyone else is competing for the last spot on the podium, which in and of itself can be interesting if you're rooting for one of those drivers. So some of the interest has to also just do with the way teams are set up to maximize the rule set and be competitive. And you're just not going to be able to manage all these variables.
I could not agree with you more.
Wow,
Sometimes,
very agreeable today.
sometimes you just have boring races. Right. Okay. I think we should probably call it on that high note. As usual, please like, please subscribe, please leave us a comment. We'll read every single one. We'll reply to as many as we possibly can. I will be doing a cheeky little video tomorrow, just looking at some of the cornering shots I got from the Hungarian Grand Prix, just to see what we can see. It's not going to be a long video. I didn't get that many shots, but some of the ones I got are quite interesting, and I think they show up some car characteristics. So have a look out for that. And we will probably have some more content coming out later this week.
Yes, we will.
As usual, stick with us, and we will see you guys in the next one.
Fix it, Fred.
Why are we fixing it, Fred?
Because it's not fixed yet.